Not a good thing for Ohio State. Like, as good as CJ Stroud and these playmakers for Ohio State are, even without Jackson Smith and Jigba, it's Ohio State and they just have dudes outside. But I think it's hard to see without TreVeyon Henderson. It's hard to see Ohio State having too much success on the ground. I think that's going to be how I think this game starts to get away from them. Is just that Georgia's going to cause them to be one-dimensional, I think, and it's going to be all about the passing game. And I think if you just put it in the air enough times, like you've seen with this Georgia secondary, like they're going to get some turnovers. Like Ringo, I think Ringo's been criticized a lot this year, kind of been a little underwhelming. I think maybe a little too much is made of it, but he's not necessarily the top 10, top 15 pick that I think people thought he was coming into the year, but he's still a really good corner. And Kamari Lassiter on the other side is a really good corner. And I'm not sure there's a better safety duo in the country than Chris Smith and Malachi Starks, honestly. Like, Malachi Starks is going to be just a future superstar as far as I'm concerned. Like, this guy is a true freshman, and he's just a baller. So, and Chris Smith, I mean, he's a first-team All-American this year. So, it's hard to see, like, just them passing it 40, 50 times and having too much success, I think.
I like it. Matt Green, Jalen Carter is interesting because I was reading Pete Thamel's piece on ESPN kind of previewing this game, and he said something that I thought was interesting in this one and talking to a coach, but he talked to a lot of different coaches in this one, SEC coaches, and he said, quote, "This year, Carter inhaled Tennessee's offensive line in Knoxville, forcing 2 fumbles and a 27-13 route. That kicked off a run that's seen 7 tackles for loss in the past 5 games." That's been the game changer to me. So it's like one of the things that I think people overlook about what happened against Tennessee in the Alabama game was Will Anderson was not a factor. Dallas Turner was not a factor. And for Tennessee to have a shot in that game, they had to not be factors. Like, that was just part of the deal, is if Tennessee could not shut down Will Anderson on the edge, the game was over, because Hendon Hooker has that quick drop. He's going to get destroyed, and they're just not going to be able to have any of the downfield time to do anything, because that was the thing. It's like they were challenging Alabama downfield so much and putting their defensive backs in so many high pressure situations that, hey, sometimes they're going to fold, and the speed kills in this league, as you and I know, and it's hard for any defensive back to keep up with Jalen Hyatt running free like that deep over the middle or down the sideline. And I wonder if you can expect, as a Georgia fan, for Jalen Carter to be able to be that just world breaker that he was in the Tennessee game and what he's been the last 5 games in both playoff games. Like, what if, because the Michigan offensive line is probably the best they'll have ever seen this year when they get there. If they do, if Michigan takes care of business and Georgia takes care of business, I just wonder what happens if he has an off game? What happens if he's neutralized and he's not a factor? Because, hey, there have been moments this year where it's like Jalen Carter has not been super dominant and played a bunch of snaps in every single game this year. What if he's not all the way locked in one of these games? What if he's thinking about the draft and being the number 1 overall pick? Like, there were concerns that did pop up, Matt Green, on Jalen Carter. And
I don't know what those concerns were. I think it's safe to say Jalen Carter's going to be locked in. And I think in general, like, that's why just so many people just undervalue defense and just the play at the line of scrimmage. Like, that doesn't slump, because if you're a elite receiver, elite quarterback or something, like, sometimes you can just be a little off. Like, you can drop a pass. Like, you're not getting whatever. The defense is kind of doing something to take you away. Like, they're, a running back, you're not getting holes or something. Like, you're just an elite monster up front and you're unblockable. You're always going to be unblockable. Like, if you're healthy, like, the defense, an offensive line isn't just suddenly going to be able to block Jalen Carter. You know what I mean? Like, and if the same goes for the offensive line. Like, and I think that's why the trenches, the play in the trenches is just so important, because that's just the foundation of your entire team. And if you can disrupt that, you can disrupt an entire team. And that's exactly what Jalen Carter is. And I think that's why he's, like, even a pass rusher like Will Anderson, I feel like at times could be taken out of a game. But Jalen Carter, when you're disrupting the middle of an offensive line, like, there's nothing they can do about it. And Georgia just gets so creative with their defensive line, the way they move them around, and will kind of get Jalen Carter matched up one-on-one against somebody. Like, it seems like they do a lot of different things, and also blitzing the corners and things like that. Javon Bullard had, 2 or 3 sacks, I think, in that Tennessee game. So Georgia just does so many different things, and I feel like it's hard to ignore how Georgia played in the big games. Because if you're looking at, like, Ohio State, like, through the years, you're not measuring Ohio State based on what they did against Purdue. You're not based on what the sleepwalking they did against Maryland or something. You're basing it on the Michigan game. And when they would play Michigan, they get up and you're seeing the best version of them. In the Big Ten Championship, you're seeing the best version of them. And when you see Georgia play this year versus Oregon, there's 5 teams that are currently ranked, but just the Oregon game was a huge, like, just atmosphere of a game. The Tennessee game, like, there hasn't been a bigger game in the history of Sanford Stadium in terms of just atmosphere and anticipation. Like, just all the big games Georgia's played this year in the SEC championship, like, that's when you've seen them look the best, honestly. The offense has been clicking. The defense has just been swallowing the opponent. Like, I think that's the games you got to measure. I'm not looking at Kentucky when it was windy and cold and they scored 16 points, or the Missouri game where they kind of sleptwalked on the road. It's like, this is going to be, no weather is involved in this. Like, this is going to be the big game atmosphere. And at this point, Georgia's got the big game experience. Stetson Bennett's got the big game experience. Like, I don't know. It's hard to see them just stopping this Georgia offense. I think that's what gets lost, I think, a lot of times when people talk about Georgia. Because as far as I'm concerned, in this game, of the 4 units on the field, 3 of them are elite. And it's Ohio State's offense, it's Georgia's offense, and Georgia's defense. Like, Ohio State's defense just isn't at the same level, as far as I'm concerned, as Georgia. And Georgia's averaging 40 points a game. Like, the way and Tennessee was just such a dynamic number 1 offense in the country this year. And the way Georgia played against that offense, like, they're obviously not the same as what CJ Stroud and Ohio State are. But, man, it's hard to see, like, I don't know. It's hard to see Ohio State stopping this Georgia defense. Like I was saying earlier, Ohio State has faced 3 top 50 offenses this year. In Michigan, Penn State, and Toledo. Georgia's faced 6 top 50 offenses. Ohio State gave up 32 points a game in those 3 games. Georgia gave up 15 points a game. Won all of those games, or on an average, they won those games by over 3 touchdowns. Beat Oregon by like 40-something points. So I just don't think Ohio State's going to have an answer for Georgia offensively. I think if this game is competitive, there's no chance Georgia is held under 40. And I think the only chance they're under 30 is if it's kind of like every other Georgia game they play, like, where maybe they jump out 21-0 in the second quarter, and then they're kind of taking their foot off the gas. I'm not saying it's going to be that big of a blowout, but I think that's the only way I don't see Georgia putting up huge points, because I think if Georgia's offense is needing to score, they're going to continue to score on this offense. Like, I've not been that impressed with what Ohio State. What I've seen from Ohio State's defense, but another part of it is just, like I said, the small sample size. Like, the Big Ten is ultimately why I struggle to have a feeling about either of these games, because this is just the worst the Big Ten, I think, has been in a long time, and I don't know if it's just a couple good teams, if these are actually 2 of the best teams in the country, or if they're just the 2 best teams in a bad Big Ten. Because, I mean, you look at like 8 of, like, the bottom